Hello and welcome to a quick update in terms of how my TBR list is yet again way off the tracks, and the various projects that I'm also working on and trying to get organized. And then once I get that figured out, hopefully the flow of the videos will be starting again in terms of reading summaries, book reviews, and as we're coming into May as well, there'll be some upcoming earthing videos. One of those will be tomorrow. The kids have told me they want a Friday off. So tomorrow will be a morning coffee compilation of the various visitors I get in my yard while I'm enjoying my morning coffee. So be sure to check that out on Friday. As far as where are other things going, well, if you've watched Panther, My Working Cat, or King of Mischief, as I titled the video, he and I have been working on George Orwell's 1984 compared to life in 2024, so 40 years later. I have my notes, but I realized as I was putting that together, I have to go through, pull a bit more information out that I didn't include there. So hopefully that will be completed either for early next week or later next week. We'll just see how it goes. And hopefully Panther doesn't help me with the typing because, yeah, he doesn't always get the keys right. And the other thing I have on the go, I've read the books for Blavatsky that I've mentioned before. Now I need to sit, get all those notes pulled together, collate that information, put that all together with what I find on the internet, checking out some sources, and then pulling that all together into an informative and hopefully enjoyable experience for my viewers. As always, I list the sources at the end of a Hoax or Holy Grail episode so that people can go through, check that out themselves, and come up with their own opinions about it. Speaking of Hoax or Holy Grail, I have my two spiral books that I've made myself. I have a bookbinder, and it comes in very handy. I got this idea actually from playing one of my match 3 games because they had a book with a spiral, and I'm like, hey, I've got a lot of extra paper and I could make that and it will help me get more organized. So who says playing games can't be useful? So these are my Hoax or Holy Grail. I've got book 1, book 2. I just counted everything up before I made this video. I have 77 different topics that I want to cover. So it isn't a lack of ideas or, where I want to go with the content. It's coming up with the time to do the reading and the research properly, and then deciding the flow of how to present that. If you haven't seen my Hoax or Holy Grail series yet, I have a playlist of them. I started with my occult project, which I did decades ago as a culminating project in grade 13. Next, I covered the Fox sisters. I then did a 3-part series on banned books. And the next one I have planned is Blavatsky. And I'll have to see, going through the topics, where I'm going to go next with it. Because like I say, I want to get a bit of a flow to that series. But you can check that out in the Hoax or Holy Grail playlist. And I see Tiki's here to scope things out. She's wondering, why is the curtain closed? I want to look outside. And yes, I do have my little notes here because I want to be sure I cover everything. I'm ready for my horror mayhem participation. This will be my first year. So I have that on the go, and I'm starting to put my different things into buckets. So that should help with some organization as well. Then as I was thinking about all the different projects, I remembered when I covered the Empath's Survival Guide. This is by Judith Orloff, and this is for people who are empaths. Yes, it is a thing. No, it is not a mental illness. In here, she talks about energy vampires. And I decided that I wanted to do a separate video about that topic, partly because it ties in with Steering by Starlight. This is by Martha Beck, a book that got me through 5 months of hell when I went through my back injury. So Martha and Julia Cameron, The Artist's Way, definitely gave me tools that got me out of that negative way into a dark place, and I've referred back to them over the decade plus since that time. So I'll be putting together a video about energy vampires, pulling the information from these 2 books. I also, if you've seen one of my book haul videos, recently found Positive Energy. This is also by Judith Orloff. I decided yesterday that I would start reading this because some of the reading I've been doing in terms of banned books and other things has just been really heavy. I just finished How Woke 1 yesterday, and I'll be talking more about that in an upcoming video in relation to Canada and why that author was banned from speaking at a public library in my area. But back to Judith. So I started reading this yesterday thinking, yes, I need to get focused on some positive energy. This says 10 extraordinary prescriptions for transforming fatigue, stress, and fear into vibrance, strength, and love. What I didn't realize until I started reading this yesterday is that it's a 10-week program. So you go through each chapter a week at a time, and then hopefully by the end of that period, things are looking better and you're feeling better and a new perspective. But she also has a chapter in here on energy vampires. So I'm going to read through her energy vampire chapter, put together that information with her other book and Martha Beck, and have that video up and ready to go. But I'm also going to work through this 1 week at a time when I do a full coverage of this particular book. Now, along with all of that, because, well, it wouldn't be me if I didn't have more on the go. Yesterday I started going through a bunch of notes. I have this handy little book that says more ideas than time. Definitely sums up where I'm at these days. Maybe that's why I'm feeling overwhelmed and just trying to narrow things down. So I went through, got all my little bits of paper into the proper files. I also did that with this handy book that I'll be using to get organized. On this one here at the top, it also mentions Google Chat, and it has my handle at Cobalt Dragon, because I'm also wanting to get some conversations going in Google Chat. So I think I'm going to start setting up perhaps a chat room for personal empowerment. So that's where we'll talk about books like Judith Orloff and parables that I'm also getting into. So books by Paulo, James Redfield, and I'm wanting to, oh, see, that affects you with the book. I'm also wanting to remake some videos on them and get that up and running. So I'll have to decide when I get those recorded and ready. So like I say, definitely more ideas than time, but I know I'll get there. One book, one project, one file at a time. Another thing that I set up as I was getting organized is my morning bucket. And I love this. This actually was a Laura Secord purchase, so the chocolates, everything that came in it were yummy. And now it's handy to keep things I need to start working on in the morning. So I've covered a guide to happiness. I've talked briefly about 52 weeks to better mental health, the self-compassion journal. I've talked about the Inner Me journal. I have a book to make notes on all of them because I don't typically write inside those journals. And I have my 365 peaceful days to color. I need to get started on that. So I've talked about all of these. Then I end up putting them to the side and not actually working through them. So now I have my morning bucket that sits here in the corner of my desk. That needs to be how I start my day. And that, along with working on positive energy, should help get me out of this overwhelm, getting my headspace back together. So we have that. I've mentioned the parables that I need to start working on. Another project, and it's still on the list, was to finish my TBR from 2023. Now, initially, I only had, I think, 7 or 8 books that I had sitting on my personal shelf of what to finish. So I need to reread The Seed of the Soul, because that's something else that I want to cover in a video. Care of the Soul. This is by Thomas Moore. I have to admit, I thought I was going to get through this quicker, but for some reason, it's a bit of a challenging read. And I'm not sure why, so that's going to go to the side for a little bit. I've also been working my way through Journeys with Plant Spirits. This is by Emma Farrell. I'm enjoying the read. I like the content. I like the idea of working with plant spirits. As I've mentioned in previous videos, I work with animal guides. It may not be for everybody, but it is for me, and I find it fascinating to read about it. And I kind of like the way my life goes with these little interesting snippets to it. So I do need to finish that as well. That's just a few of the TBRs that I had when I was updating on Goodreads the other day, because I'm working towards my goal of 50 books for the reading challenge there. I realized that I had a TBR shelf set up there that has 43 books. I'm like, ay vey. Now, the upside is I own the majority of those books, so what I'm going to have to do is go through my TBR on Goodreads, go through my books, and just set up a cube and start working my way through there. So I know I'm going to get through it. It's just, yeah, I didn't realize there were 43 books that I still hadn't got to, and one of them is my Dune box set, so I definitely want to get that upstairs because I have my fiction books downstairs, so I need to get that up so that I can read it. The other thing that I need to finish in terms of a TBR are the 24 in 2024. To learn more about that, check out hashtag 24BB. And I'm up to, I think, 9 out of the 24 books there. I have a few more that some I'll get from the library. I want to go pick up the Golden Compass, which happens to be at my home branch. So I just need to get myself there, and that will be 3 more books. I need to finish listening to The Outsiders, as I've borrowed it as an audiobook. But now I also have something else that came up. And yesterday I was super excited as I got Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. This came up because of a conversation that I had with Enzo, and I've mentioned him before. And Enzo and I will be doing a live stream in August. He's a very busy guy, and he's on a number of live streams. But Enzo and I were talking about, what to do, topics to cover. We decided we would do it in August because that gives me time to reread various other books. And Enzo has mentioned this, and I decided, yeah, I definitely want to give this a read. What I didn't know until this arrived yesterday, and I was reading the back cover, the long-awaited follow-up to Hunt for Skinwalker. Ta-da! I read this several months ago, so I had no idea that these two books connected. So now I want to read Hunt for Skinwalker again, and then, of course, the follow-up book, which Enzo has told me about, and it sounds very fascinating. The other thing I found interesting on the back cover, Skinwalkers at the Pentagon has been reviewed by the U.S. Department of Defense and cleared for public release. I found that fascinating because, as I mentioned in my other surprise video with books, Encounter in Rendlesham Forest also involves the U.S. Department of Defense as well as the British counterpart to that because it was a U.S. military base on British soil. So I'm definitely going to be rereading that. And they are already here. This is by Sarah Scholes, UFO Culture and Why We See Saucers. This is definitely I need to reread, make notes, because I know she talked about Mr. Bigelow, who is a big part of this research. I believe she also mentions George Knapp, who is a journalist and a co-author on these two books. The other author is Colm A. Kelleher. He's one of the scientists who is at the ranch. And this one with the Pentagon is also James T. Lacatski. So this is 3 individuals who wrote this book. It was just Kelleher and Knapp. So although I won't be covering UFOs until August, so at least I know I have months to prepare for those videos and that live stream with Enzo. Now I'm itching to read Skinwalkers at the Pentagon. And I haven't decided yet if I'm just going to read this first or if I should do the right thing and read Hunt for the Skinwalkers and then go on to the second book, because these are several years apart. This is 2021, and their first book was published in 2005, so there's a bit of a gap there. And there's definitely a lot of controversy, theories, ideas. What was this all about? So in a nutshell, that's kind of where I'm at. And all of this comes back to, and I definitely need to get to this as well, Refuse to Choose by Barbara Scheer. And I love this book, and I've read it at least 3 times. I need to read through it again. Use all of your interests, passions, and hobbies to create the life and career of your dreams. It's unfortunate that since Barbara's passing, her website no longer has the message boards where scanners could connect and talk and share ideas and strategies of how to navigate this world. And what I really wanted to do, and I still may someday, is go through her book and update it. So I wanted to go through kind of chapter by chapter and see if I could come up with ideas to somehow update it. Like I say, it does make me sad that on our website those message boards are gone, which means there's no longer a place for people who are scanners to connect. Refuse to choose. I highly recommend, especially if you notice you've got ADHD tendencies, if you haven't been tested or you're not quite sure that that's what fits, definitely a good read. It may give you some ideas, and even if you are ADHD, it can still give you some tools and strategies and feeling better about yourself and where your life is going. So that is everything I have on the go, on top of course, continuing to get my files and information organized on other things. Still wanting to get outside to do gardening, but it's much too cold. And the reality is, it's not even May yet. Typically here, we don't start yard work until after May 24, because that's when the chance of frost and things have gone by. But this year, because we had so little snow, things are growing and going crazy. So I've started a bit early, but it's going to have to wait, and I have to get all that planned. And then in my case, it's also how much energy do I have in a day and what else can I get done? Because to do some of this requires either sitting at a desk or coming up with some other plans. I know I'm going to get there. If you're still here listening to me, thank you so much. If you've read any of these books, find any of them of interest, waiting to see what I have to say about them and where this all goes, be sure to give that like button a tickle, give me a thumbs up, or comment about the particular book down below. Until next time, be sure to take good care.